Thanks for coming out to All Things Open. It's great to be here. Great to see folks virtually, but it's been really good to see folks like in person, the real faces. So I'm glad we are slowly crawling out of this. I'm the last one standing here between you and a cold beer, so I'll try to keep it entertaining. We have, I think, 45 minutes, but I'll try to maybe show you some stuff to get you a little excited as I am about this new thing we're going to talk about, .NET Maui. I'm an old man. A few years back, you used to not be able to talk about a whole lot about .NET and Microsoft stuff at All Things Open because things were not open source, but that's been completely changed, and pretty much everything we talk about is open source, which is great. So thank you for being here. Thanks for coming out here to spend an hour with me. Let's talk about .NET Maui. I am Sam Basu. I am a dev advocate for Progress Software. Hopefully, some of you know us for the things we make to help developers be more successful. UI components for .NET and JavaScript, web, desktop, and mobile. That's me on the socials, Twitter, GitHub, everywhere. That's me if you need to get hold of me. Okay, so let's begin. First up, we have all lived through, hopefully I can say lived and not still living through. We are slowly coming out of a global pandemic, so hopefully you are safe and your families are well taken care of, and we are all trying to be as productive as we can. So I think all of us deserve a little bit more patience and grace for ourselves and our families these days. I have kind of come all the way from the north down, which is not all that much away, but we have 5 Great Lakes up north. I live by one of those big lakes, Lake Erie. It's normally beautiful most times of the year. We do get quite a bit of like lake effect snow. So good to be here. And this week has been fantastic with the sun and the weather. So we're going to talk about .NET Maui, but I wanted to set the stage. And again, the slides are not important. I want to maybe do 20 minutes of, kind of setting the stage, and then we'll look at as many demos as we can. But we are talking fundamentally about, a cross-platform framework. And this is largely for .NET devs, but, web devs and especially if you do web.NET, you're very welcome. JavaScript, not so much here, but again, it's how you mix and match your stack, right? So we want to talk about 3 things here. Although we are fundamentally talking about mobile apps, for iOS, Android, and other platforms, we will talk about desktop as well. We'll talk about kind of mixing and matching some of the web technologies with desktop stuff, because that's kind of the reality. A lot of us who work in enterprise, we have big desktop applications. So how can we modernize? How can we migrate? How can we mix and match our technologies? So let's talk about mobile. And it's 2022, although it's really not, but it's almost Halloween, right? Which means it's almost Thanksgiving and Christmas, and the year is over just like that. So this is my 1-minute spiel on all things mobile. You have a lot of choice, and I think that's a good thing. As developers, where we have a lot of choice, and there is no right or wrong answer, right? It depends on what experiences you come with. It depends on what else is your team building. So you can go build for mobile in a variety of ways. Pose. All right, so my point is, if you're doing web stuff, right, with JavaScript, with HTML, CSS, keep on doing web stuff. There are lots of ways of bringing that over to mobile devices and making it a nice citizen. There are lots of like SPA-type frameworks, Angular, Bootstrap, Vue, React, Blazer, Kendo UI. There are lots of frameworks, and pretty much everything is open source. So you can make mobile web very nicely and make it a nice citizen on a mobile device. If you are caring, then you can make it a progressive web app, which is something progressively, it gets better. You have push notifications, you have service workers running in the background. So it's a really good experience on mobile devices. If you want, you can make things native, but again, it's a hard sell because it's 3 very different platforms and all supporting a single app, so it's a little expensive. If you wanted to do just hybrid, this is kind of where we were at like back in 2010 when things got started. PhoneGap, Cordova, that's still a thing. But again, my advice nowadays would be to go build native apps with the same tech. So why would you build hybrid? There are things like React Native, Native Script, which lets you build truly native cross-platform apps with JavaScript. And then you come down to the cross-compiled story, which is where a lot of the .NET things play along with. Flutter is there, which is Dart, but there are a few players in this space. Xamarin being the biggest one here, because it's been around for like 6-7 years now, and that is the piece that is evolving into .NET Maui. So let's talk about the last piece here. But my point is, if you're doing the other stuff, please be at peace, because the tools are great, and you have the ability to reach just about every platform with web stuff now. So let's talk about .NET and Xamarin, because that's kind of where .NET Maui belongs. So as we stand right now, this is .NET, right? .NET 5 actually, .NET 6 is coming in the next 2 weeks. There's a big .NET conference happening in early November, and that's when .NET 6 will be officially out. The RC bits are out, like the release candidate bits are out. And it's a good story. It's a giant unified platform, although, I mean, there is a little bit of, I wouldn't say lie, but as of like .NET 5, things were not completely uniform. Things are getting better with .NET 6, and it comes down to, the base class libraries, all of the different core pieces that make up our .NET, those are being combined into a single one. So for Blazer, if you do .NET for web, that stuff was done in .NET 5. In .NET 6, you're getting the best of Mono, which is the runtime for .NET outside of Windows, combined with .NET Core. So it is getting really as unified as possible. The tools of our trade are great. I mean, you're not stuck to Windows. I'm on a Mac here, but I will show you Windows as well. But Visual Studio on Windows, on Mac, VS Code, everything is great. CLI is your common thing. So it's a good thing that we stand on with .NET. Like I said, Xamarin has been around for 5, 6, 7 years now, and it really makes it easy. If you're a .NET dev, this is easy to kind of get into and start building cross-platform, truly native apps. I bring out these slides because this is where things are evolving and folks question where things are going. This is kind of where things started. This was called Xamarin iOS and Xamarin Android. None of this is changing actually in .NET 6. It's just rebranded, and now it's called .NET for iOS and .NET for Android. You write shared .NET code, like C# code. You can also do F# if you want. And then you write the platform heads separately for iOS, Android, and all of the Windows devices. So this is still the case as it was last year, just evolving to be a part of .NET. Then Xamarin Forms came along probably 5 years back, and this has really been popular for .NET devs because, again, as a .NET dev, I come from a heavy .NET background. I do just enough JavaScript to be dangerous, but this is easy because I don't have to learn about iOS or Android. I can just write .NET, Xaml, and C#, and I get to write abstracted code that renders as native UI on each of the platforms. Now, this is a little hard to pull off, the shared UI stack. The purple and the green and the blue don't entirely go away because you do want to know a little bit as to what's going on in the native land. There are times when you want to render something just for iOS maybe that isn't there on any other platform. So it helps to know the native stack a little bit. Now, while this was good, it actually, there are some pain points in Xamarin Forms development today. But it is nothing like out of ordinary for .NET devs to get into this. Like you do WinForms, like folks do WPF, folks do UWP. This is all a .NET code base, so it's easy to get into. What they're trying to do is evolve Xamarin Forms into .NET Maui, which is a nice catchy term, and kind of try to address some of the pain points that developers have complained about. A few more things here before we go into .NET Maui. This is a set of libraries. That's actually one NuGet package, which is how we bring in our dependencies that gives you access to, this is not an exhaustive list, probably 30 plus APIs for all of the sensors on your devices, right? Your camera, your accelerometer. You don't want to write Java or Swift code, you want to write .NET. This is the thing that gives you access to all of that with just C# code. And this is actually also migrating, and now it's built into .NET Maui as well. So you can stay in C# land as like pretty much all day long. And again, I don't work for Microsoft, but kudos to them for where credit is due. They really have pivoted and everything is open source, which in Microsoft and in .NET land, it comes with a little bit of juggling at times. There are strong opinions and there are heated discussions, but that's just part of open source. But everything that's been done on .NET Maui is open source. You can see what they're doing nightly builds. So why are we evolving? Well, things are a little complicated with Xamarin Forms development today. I wouldn't say they are deal breakers, but real world projects get very complex and you have lots of dependencies, platform specific things you're doing. The build system could be faster, the developer inner loop, like how quickly do you make a change and see it on your devices, that could be faster. So they're trying to address a whole bunch of these things in the next iteration, which is called .NET Maui. Now, they have been working on this since late last year. And if you have paid attention to maybe some of the announcements that have come from the .NET team, this is being delayed just a few months. So this is actually not shipping with .NET 6, which is coming in November. It's got a lot of dependencies on iOS and Xcode and Android and all of the Visual Studio updates across Windows and Mac. So it's just a lot of tooling. They have the runtimes ready, but the tooling is not. So this is actually shipping in Q2 of next year. So hopefully with a little bit more time, they can settle all the tooling troubles. But this is exciting because what it is a new way for you to build, an evolved way rather, I should say, for you to build cross-platform native UI from .NET, targeting iOS, Android, and a few other things now. So we have always been able to do mobile, but can we also do desktop with this latest modern .NET? So it literally is going to sit on .NET 6, but it has implications. It is the new evolution of Xamarin Forms. Like I said, it's not shipping with .NET 6, coming a few months later on. So what exactly is it? So the first thing is, it is a runtime that is right on top of .NET 6, but in addition to iOS or Android, which is the bread and butter for Xamarin Forms, now it lets you do desktop, so Mac and Windows. And it's doing so in a very nice way by not reinventing the wheel. For Windows, there is a stack called WinUI 3, which is the latest Windows UX platform, end-to-end, that sits on top of Win32 apps as well as .NET native apps. So .NET Maui uses WinUI 3 to reach Windows. Apple has a different problem. Everybody wants to write for iOS. Not a lot of people want to write for the Mac desktop. It's a niche audience. So Mac, with Mac Monterey, Apple has had this thing building up for running your iPad apps on the Mac desktop, right? That's called Mac Catalyst. So .NET Maui is actually using Mac Catalyst to reach the Mac desktop. So it's an Apple-approved way of going from UIKit to AppKit. So desktop is done now. Now there are a few things missing, which we'll talk about. Linux is still missing. Again, even with Microsoft's engineering, they have to focus on the things that are like the most people, like the masses that are needed. So that's coming, could be a community-driven thing. They already have support for something called Tizen, which is a Samsung operating system. If you are running a Samsung fridge or a TV, it's running Tizen, and you can now do .NET Maui. A few other things they're trying to address is some of the project structure. I don't think my cursor is working very well here, but it used to get complicated. Used to do a lot of things for specifically iOS and just for Android. Now it's all a little bit together. Your fonts, your images, those are all together, and it's multi-targeted. So from a single project, you can now switch and say, go run this on Windows, go run this on Mac. You don't have to do anything else. So the build system is smarter, and things are just overall simplified. The big thing in terms of the dev tooling is something called hot reload, which is where once your app is running, and the web guys actually have this much easier. They have things like Webpack, where you can look at a component that's changing and just change that. .NET is a little different because it's pre-compiled, it's ahead of time compiled. So they have to rediscover how the tooling works, and now you can change your Xaml, which is your UI markup layer, as well as your C# code, and see that replicated across on your devices, both simulator and physical devices in real time almost. So that's very, very good. A little bit about where we stand right now, with .NET Maui isn't the first XAML C# ecosystem. This has been around for 15 years now with WPF, which is what the first one was. Folks might remember Silverlight, which actually officially ended support earlier this October. You have been doing XAML in C#. If you have been doing any of this, UWP or Xamarin Forms, you are right at home. You are using the dialect of XAML, that is Xamarin Forms, but again, all of the tooling, all of the ecosystem is also right there for you. Something that kind of goes nicely with the XAML and C# code base is a design pattern called MVVM, Model View View Model. You can obviously do that with .NET Maui, but in terms of how the things are structured and engineered, makes it open to a few more things, which we'll talk about. We'll talk about how Blazor comes in. There's a new pattern called MVU. Well, it's new to like .NET devs. I think the Flutter, the React Native, and the web folks are much more used to this. This is model view update. It's a simpler thing. There is no view model. The model is essentially your application state, and that drives the UI, and then you have one update loop, which kind of comes back and updates the application state, and things just move on. So this is actually also welcome. It's still experimental in .NET Maui, but you can see how things are being opened up a little bit. So we're not in a walled garden of just .NET developers. If you come from different backgrounds, you should be feeling a little bit more welcome in .NET Maui. I'll show you a little bit of MVU if I have time. Okay, so that's all the things with mobile, and you can see how things are evolving from Xamarin Forms into .NET Maui, which we'll look at examples. What about desktop, right? Let's talk about Windows first. I'm an old man, so I look at this list and I'm like, oh, this is nice, this is liberating, but it can also be a little intimidating, right? Like, why do I have so many choices as to how to build for Windows? WinForms came out, I think, 2002, right? If I'm not mistaken. WPF came out 2006, and those things are going strong. Like this, all the top 4 are just all native Windows tech. UWP came along running your Windows apps on HoloLens and Surface Hubs and so on. WinUI 3 is the latest UI stack that runs everywhere. So the point is, like, if you're doing any of those first 4, you're fine. It runs on .NET Framework, runs on .NET 5, will run on .NET 6, and you can bring in some of the latest things like a web browser component or ink support or touch support, .NET Maui support. You can bring in and start modernizing some of those things. If you want to do web stuff, then yeah, go ahead and do PWAs on desktop. That'll work. Electron, so the shell that gives you the way to run your web apps on Windows, that's still very welcome. So VS Code, Slack, Figma, they all use Electron, and it's battle tested. There are a few more options here, but the last 2 are the ones that I want to focus on. Blazor is how you build .NET web apps, and now that's a great way of kind of leaning on .NET Maui and letting your Blazor apps come in to the desktop. So now we are really bringing in web tech into .NET desktop. And then .NET Maui, like I said, reaches Windows through WinUI. What about Mac? Again, similar ideas, similar story. Electron is welcome, PWAs are welcome. Uno Platform, Avalonia is welcome. Blazor Hybrid is welcome through .NET Maui, and Mac Catalyst is how we're going to go reach Mac desktop from .NET Maui. Similar story with Linux, although the number of use cases where somebody's using Linux as their main desktop is maybe a little shrinking, but you can still reach Linux. Web, right? So let's talk about web. Lots of different things you can do with web stuff. All of your JavaScript SPA frameworks, it's all good. And you can bring them in to desktop using progressive web apps or Electron. The Blazor part, let's talk about this a little bit. Blazor is for those folks who really don't want to write JavaScript, right? It's C# front and back, and you can write Blazor in 2 ways. One is server-side, where you have a little SignalR real-time bridge to maintain the DOM on the front end, and then you can go completely client-side through what's called WebAssembly, which is an open standard. So it's not tied to any company, and we are literally shipping .NET DLLs to the web and making things run. So Blazor is actually very welcome with .NET Maui if you want to consider sharing some code with web stuff. All right, so we're 18 minutes in, and I'm done. I want to show you lots of code here. But before I go on, I work for Progress Software, so I am biased, but we make tools for .NET developers for web, mobile, desktop, really any app, any platform. So if you're looking for UI, please look around. We are not the only ones, so please look around and find the right UI for you. That's for all things .NET. We'll talk about Maui a little bit. We already have a suite of all of the UI. This is the stuff that's really hard to make, your grids and your charts. Those are the things that you don't want to create by hand, so you want to get that UI help. And if you want to do JavaScript, then we have Kendo UI, which is very popular for UI components for jQuery and React and Vue and Angular, you name it. So however you are coming to us, feel free to use some modern, polished, performant UI. But again, look around and pick the one that's right for you. Okay. Any questions so far from the room? Are we good? Yes, yes, sir. For .NET Maui? Okay, so the question was, where do I build it? Great question. Let me answer that and actually show you. How about that? So they're trying to be agnostic. You should not have any differences between Windows or Mac. However, the reality is right now there is a big push to get Visual Studio 2022 out for Windows, right? So the Windows story is actually a little better at this point because VS 2022 is shipping on November 8th, I believe. That's the launch date. So that is a little further ahead than the Mac side. They are also trying to do Mac. In fact, VS 22 for Mac is completely rewritten in AppKit. So it is absolutely a native Mac desktop application, but they're a little further behind. So right now on a Mac, it's a little bit command line, but if you're okay with command line, the tooling is the same. The stuff on Visual Studio for Windows essentially uses the same command line tools as on Mac. But eventually you should not have a difference, if that makes sense. Okay, let's look at stuff. 20 minutes in, so we got 25 minutes, I think. All right, let's look at stuff here. All right, I will make things bigger once we go into code. But first thing is, if you want to start with .NET Maui, right? Do a search, you're likely going to end up on this page. This is the docs page, and this is under construction, so don't read too much into it. They're starting to put more and more stuff into it. But the most important thing here is the installation, right? So they kind of walk you through. You really want to be on Visual Studio 2022 if you're on Windows, because that's where you have the latest templates and the runtimes. You can actually still be on 2019, but you're going to miss some templates and some of the other built-in things, but you can do things manually if you wanted to. Now they have a simple checkbox that says, hey, give me .NET Maui stuff, and you have it. If you're on a Mac like I am, then things are a little different because you have to kind of go with CLI, command line tools, which is this one here. So let me show you the Mac side first, and then we'll look at Windows a little bit. So let me pull up terminal. All right. Is that big enough for everyone to see? Let's do this. So .NET is a command line, right? So if I do a .NET list my SDKs, this is nice because it kind of right away shows me all the .NETs that I have. You can see that I've had stuff from like 3.0 all the way to .NET 6 Preview 1, which started shipping back in February, early February. And right now we are at RC1 and RC2. In fact, you can actually see RTM. So they're getting ready to ship .NET 6. So this is almost done, and it'll be shipping production ready in 2 weeks. In fact, the last RC version actually has a go live support, so you can start building production apps. So this is all of my .NET. And the nice thing is it's just a folder. It's not like .NET Framework, which is giant and monolithic. Now it's just a folder. I can blow it away. I can re-get it. I can bundle all the .NET runtimes with my app if I needed to. So that's my .NET runtime, okay? The next thing is if I do a .NET new, right? So this is how I start my apps. This is the same as doing a file new project in Visual Studio, but I'm on a Mac, so I'm going to show you the command line things first. Lots of things here, WPF, iOS. This is .NET for iOS, right? This is the same as what Xamarin iOS used to be. And then you got Android, all of your Android classes, Java libraries, everything is right here. This is all the .NET Maui stuff, right? You can actually get a few more options here on command line than you get with Visual Studio, but these two things are the ones that you absolutely must have, Maui and Maui Blazer. Maui is default .NET. Maui Blazer is if you want to bring in some Blazor and some web tech into desktop, into mobile. That's what that template is for. So you do a .NET new Maui, and that's how it spits out a project. It gives you a template, and that's how you start. So let me show you this stuff. So I'm going to go into a folder where I keep all my stuff. And let's look at Maui Hello, right? So which is my hello world. I have not changed any line of code here, which is the same as doing .NET new Maui. So I'm going to go into that. And I have to remember this command because you still have to remember the framework on which you're running. So we'll do a .NET build for iOS. Let's start iOS. And you can do a .NET restore, right? So that's going to bring down all of your dependencies, NuGet or otherwise. Everything is up to date. And then I can do a .NET build, run it on iOS. So at this point, it's running a .NET build on .NET 6. and it's realizing that I'm choosing to do a build for iOS. This is the multi-targeting thing, and now it's going to go look for my default iOS simulator and try to launch the app. So this is just the Maui Hello World experience. And the default is an iPad mini on my machine, 6th generation iOS 15. You can actually get a list of all of your simulators and run it on an iPhone or whichever device you want. So that's the Hello World app experience on a Maui. It's just a click me, you click a counter, it goes up, right? So pretty simple. But I can also do the same exact app without changing any lines of code, and I can do a Mac catalyst. Now keep in mind, we are writing straight up .NET code here, which I'll show you in a second, but without any changes, right? I just flipped where I want to see the app running. I just chose a different build. And now you get the Maui Hello app. You can kind of see, or maybe not, down here in the corner, like that's a little icon. So this is on my dock now, and this is a native Mac desktop application. So we made the jump from UIKit to AppKit, and everything is rendered as native app, native canvas on your Mac. So that's great. So that's iOS and Mac right away. Windows is a similar story. I just cannot run Windows on a Mac until I go to Windows. But that's just the .NET Maui startup experience, right? So you can use the same exact templates on a Windows just through Visual Studio templates. Right. So let's take a look at this. So I'm going to pull up VS Code here and make things a little bigger so you can see. So right out of the gate, you'll notice that the CS proj file, which is how we creep our project dependencies, maybe that's too big. Little things here, this is like an SDK style project. So all you have to do is say use Maui, your app identifiers live here, all of your app dependencies, all of your package references live here, and that's pretty much it. And then you look at this one here, first up, this resources folder. So your fonts and your images can now stay in the single project. They're not in the platform specific project. And then anything that has to be platform specific, everything is all together here, Android, iOS, Mac, Catalyst, and Windows. So if you needed to do something specific for iOS or Android or Windows, you can do so. But for the most part, your goal should be to try to stay as generic as you can, and then go to native if you really need to. So that's just the default experience. When our app starts up, this is XAML. If you have done any XAML, WPF or UWP or Silverlight, this will feel familiar. It's a little verbose, but once you get used to it, it's not that bad, and the tooling really helps. Lots of XAML here. This is our UI markup layer. The startup here is a little different here. Let me go to Maui program. This is kind of using the .NET host builder pattern. This is how a Blazer app kind of bootstraps itself, and that's how it's using DI a little bit better, and is just plugging into the .NET host system. Beyond that, like this is the first page of your app. This one is using a scroll view. It's got all of those labels, and that's just the button click me event handler. So everything is pretty much XAML. You got a code behind that kind of increments the counter. Pretty standard stuff, right? So this is just Maui Hello World experience. All right, now let's look at another thing here. I'm going to go up one level, and we're going to go into Maui Blazer. And now let's go run this again on iOS. Excuse me. So similar idea, similar .NET Maui app running on .NET 6, but except this one is trying to bring in some web stuff here. We'll give it a second. All right, so the iPad simulator comes up. All right, different look and feel, right? Same .NET Maui app, but now everything that you see here is coming from web code, right? This is, I mean, if you've done any Blazor, this will look familiar right out of the gate, right? This is just a Blazor Hello World template. You got your counter, which you can increment, and you got some fetching of data. So this is web stuff, right? So, and I can also run this on Mac Catalyst. So what is going on here? So here's the thing. If I pull up the code for this, it's going to be familiar and kind of similar bootstrapping of the app with some XAML, but then we do something different. So everything is the same until you get to this main page XAML. So we start with the content page. Yes, I know you don't have some dependencies. Now, in here, you are in XAML land, which is how we build our UI markup, right? So you can render all of the native stuff from XAML if you want. But here, we are choosing not to do XAML. Instead, we are doing a Blazor web view, which is the newest web view component on every platform, right? So behind Blazor web view is a rendering engine that's going to render the corresponding web view. So if you're on Windows, it's going to render web view 2. If you're on Mac, it's going to render what's called WK web view, which is a Safari web view. Beyond that, it's just a web view, and essentially everything that you had in a Blazor project can be brought over. So you notice that this one here has a slightly different project style here. This one has pages, and it has, root, which is all the web stuff. So in your pages is where your counter components and your index components live. That's just all HTML, right? So this is straight up Blazor, just brought into a desktop application through Maui. Maui is just doing that bootstrapping, giving you the app structure, and then throwing a giant web view so you can render whatever you want. So if you have, and I can actually show you this, if you have an older Windows application, like WPF or WinForms, you can actually still do this. You don't have to rewrite that as .NET Maui. You can just bring in the web view if you wanted to. So this is nice. It just kind of encourages code sharing in a little way. That's the counter component which we just talked about. Okay, let's look at a real app. And since it's the end of the day, let's try to make things a little interactive here, shall we? So let me show you an app, first on Mac, and then I'm going to show it to you on Windows. Right, so, oh, and by the way, if you're on a Mac, like I am, then you have access to Visual Studio 2022 for Mac. It used to be an internal preview, but now the first official previews are out, so you can go get this. It's actually much faster than the regular Visual Studio. So here I am on a Mac with Visual Studio. I'm going to bump up the fonts here a little bit. Hopefully you can see. Yep. All right, so let's go ahead and run this thing real quick. By the way, and before I run it, you'll notice that this is a standard kind of a Xamarin Forms-ish app, right? It's the .NET Maui is the runtime here, but I have platform-specific things for Mac and then iOS. This one's a .NET Standard library, so I want to do everything in my .NET Standard library so I don't have to write platform-specific code. So let's go ahead and run this on my Mac, and let's fire this up. Oh, hang on. I got errors. All right, let's do a rebuild. And while it's doing that, I will show you what it does. Rebuild. No. Oh, I left something in here and it's getting confused. All right, rebuild. Now, while it's building, if you have a phone or a tablet or any device that you're looking at, let's have you pull up a little URL here. If the internet works out and if Azure is still up. Oh, it is up. All right. So folks, you can do this virtually if you want, but sam signalar backend.azurewebsites.net. If you want to pull that up, then we can have a little bit of fun. This is a real-time chat application, which is as simple as it gets. But I'm trying to show you that you can mix and match web code with stuff on iOS, stuff on Mac, and stuff on Windows, right? So I can go in here and I can do things like, oops, not that. I can do web, hang on, web, and I can say hi. I can do a send, right? So this will just keep on working. It's just a real-time signalar backend, so it just kind of sends out the messages that it's getting. So yeah, there you go. Kirsten says hello. So feel free to chime in here. Now let's go back to Windows or our Blazor desktop application here. So hopefully that build did succeed, and now we can deploy this. Okay. It's coming. Oh no. It's not rendering the web view. Really? It's not getting the web view right. So it's stuck on something else. I can show you the same app on Windows. It's the same idea. But I was wondering, or I was really hoping I could start with the Mac side first. Let's do one more build. Let's just do a build for this guy, Mac OS. Did the build succeed? Yes. It's really struggling to render the Blazer stuff. So this is a .NET Maui app, and it's supposed to render the Blazer stuff right underneath, and it's not doing it. All right, we'll switch to Windows. How about that? And still try to see the same app. Let's see. Oh, there you go, Dan Brand. Hey, there is no auth, there is no filter here, so please keep it clean and family friendly. Let's actually pull up Windows here, okay? And this is where my MacBook fan goes crazy because it's a VM. When I'm at home, I do have like a Windows tower. I stream a lot. But when I'm on the go, the VM actually can go with me. So even though it's a little taxing on a little laptop, I like to keep using a VM. All right. So I'm on Windows 10. I have not updated this to Windows 11 yet, which I should. All right, let's pull up the same app here. So that one was iOS or Mac on the Mac side of things. This one I can actually, I can close that out. Let's show you the Windows side of things here. There are no code differences between Windows and Mac. It's just which head are you using? All right, so let's see if this one will work. Start without debugging. Ah, you're hungry. That's funny. I am hungry too. Oh, tonight we can relax and have some drinks as well. There we go. All right. So this one here, this is a view I was trying to show you on a Mac, but it just did not work. Now, this one here is a native .NET Maui app, but it kind of brings in, like on the Mac side, like it was rendering the hello world, then it didn't render any of the web view stuff that was right underneath. Now, in here, what's interesting is this hello world is native. That's a native label on Windows. It's going to be a native label on iOS or Android. And if I go to the counter here, I can update that native label and the counter from the button up here, which is native, as well as from here, which is a Blazer button. That's because this counter is actually a Blazer component. So this is pure web stuff that we're doing on a .NET application. So now let's see if the chat room here is up. Blazer on Windows says, hola, send. Yep, it went over here. Let's go check our web stuff here. I don't know if you can see it. Blazer on Windows says hola. So it's a real-time app with the web backend talking to Windows and Mac, although the Mac one didn't work. You get the idea, right? On iOS or on Android. So it's really a cross-platform app. So how is this working out? So the whole trick here is we come down to main Razor here, which is the main component here. This like stack layout, this label, this button, that's all native. That's what Xamarin Forms used to do. That's what .NET Maui does. Nothing's changing, but in here is a Blazer web view. So we're sticking in the web view and we're saying, go render that Blazer app inside of your .NET Maui shell. Beyond that, that's just a counter updating, and that counter is actually is a Blazer counter. This is the chatroom.razor. So this one's actually the one that's using the ASP.NET SignalR client. You have some HTML here, and this is where it's connecting up to the SignalR backend, which is my little Azure websites thing, and it's ready to receive messages as well as send messages up. That's how the real-time like chat thing is working. Now, let me show you one other piece of code here. This one here is in index.razor. You can see the file name up here. So this is purely a Blazer side. This is purely coming from my pages and the index.razor view. Now check out this line of code here, using system.io. So now we are in Blazer, which is meant for web stuff, but we are trying to do stuff on desktop. And the point is a .NET Maui app on desktop, be it on Windows or be it on Mac, is absolutely a native app. So you can do a few more extra things that you cannot if you are just running inside of a web shell as a PWA. For example, you have access to go out of process. You have access to all of the Windows specific APIs and sensors on devices, right? So check out these like 5 lines of code. I stole this from somebody at Microsoft because it's hilarious. So we are starting up a new file here, giving it a temporary file name. we are writing something to it, and then we're going system diagnostics, start a process, notepad, open up that file. I'm going to write something to it. When I'm done, I want to read that stream back out, and this message is essentially an H3 component here, right? So when I run this, what do you think it's going to happen? I'm going to go back to home. That's my index view. Do something native. Check this out. Notepad comes up on Windows. We are out of the process here, going and figuring out something on Windows land, right? So I can do hello, all things open, right? And I save this and I close it. We bring it back as an H3 in our Blazor view, right? So although this is Blazor, although this is web stuff, it is running on .NET. So you have full access to do all kinds of like native stuff if you need to. Now, before we started, actually this gentleman here has a WinForms application, so I wanted to kind of address that because a lot of enterprises are thinking about this, like how do I modernize my stuff, right? So let's actually quickly show you a different view of this, because this is like kind of going all in with .NET Maui. You don't have to. So let me show you two little iterations of this. And 4:40, I got 5 minutes left. Okay, I'll maybe try to show you 3 to 4 more demos in 5 minutes. Okay, this one here is just a straight up WPF application, okay? It's running on .NET Framework. So this is just as native of a WPF app as it gets. The one thing I've done here is utilized a NuGet package that's coming in from this WebView 2. So I'm bringing in WebView 2 on Windows, and then I'm sticking it in and I'm giving it a source, right? So other than that, no changes in my WPF app. So if I go ahead and run this now, and I'm pointing it to a website, obviously. Now, you get a WPF app, right? And I can make this like full screen if you want, but inside of it is that giant web view. This is like all of the web stuff, because I literally pointed it to a URL. So this might be your lowest hanging fruit. If you want to bring in web stuff into WinForms or WPF, you can do that right now. Now, this looks very much web-y. What about if you wanted to actually build out your web stuff inside of your .NET project? So let me show you another solution here. Let's see, if I go to web view on WPF maybe. All right, so this one here, you'll notice that this is actually a WPF app, but it actually has www.root here. Now I'm starting to use some Blazor components here. So I'm bringing in that Blazor web view. This is not a .NET Maui app. This is still a straight up WPF app, but now it's running on .NET 6. And with that, I can do some additional things. So if I go run this thing real quick. All right, so now you have a WPF app, and if I didn't tell you, this would not look like a web app at all. This is looking like a kind of a traditional desktop application. There's a counter here, except that counter is actually a Blazor counter, right? So I am bringing in a web component, and I have a HTML page here. I have some CSS here. Without any CSS, it just looks bland, and maybe that's kind of what you want to start off with, and then you bring in your Bootstrap or Material or whatever it is that you want. But that counter.razor is what's incrementing that counter. So a Blazor web component injected and running inside of a desktop application. So that's absolutely doable. All right, 3 minutes left. I want to show you one more thing, maybe two things. Let's go back to Mac here for a second. Because I did mention MVU pattern, and you might be wondering what that is about. So let's show you this little app here. There is an open source thing called Comet, right? So this is a gentleman named James Clancy who started it. Now he's got a bunch of contributors, and this is kind of taking a different look at how .NET Maui renders the UI. Do you have to do Xaml? And if Xaml is the thing that you don't like, you don't have to, right? You can do straight up C#, and that's kind of the point. So here's Visual Studio, and you'll notice that this one is not depending on, this one still has Xamarin Forms, but eventually, and I can show you a project where it doesn't have, well, it actually does not have Xamarin Forms, but it's using Xamarin Essentials, which is also being renamed as .NET Maui Essentials. So let me go ahead and run this real quick. I don't want it to be on the iPod Touch. I would rather have an iPhone 13 Max, please. All right, fingers crossed. Let's see if this will run. Sorry if I'm jumping around. I'm trying to show you as many things as I can because some of it is exciting to me. All right, so iPhone 13 Pro Max comes out. Come on, I got 1 minute left. All right, here we go. So super simple UI. But while we have it on the side, I'm going to show you what this is. This is .NET MAUI, but it's not using any XAML, right? So everything that you see as a state is actually my model. So kind of like the React pattern, my model is my application state. And then I have this thing called the body, right? And this whole method is the whole update method in an MView pattern, right? So it's executing that update method over and over again, and it's diffing on it, try to exactly figure out which part of the visual tree did you change. So I have my horizontal stack, I have my vertical stacks, and then so I can type something in here, right? And when I go to the slider here, that slider is coming from this, and then the security value is what is tied to a text box right up here, right? So as I move this around, you can see like the braveness value kind of changes. So it is kind of two-way data binding. A lot of people who do MView think that it's one way. It looks like it's one way because you are just rendering the view from a model, but it is absolutely two-way, right? So you can do two-way data binding, and when I hit login, everything empties out because I'm literally just cleaning out all of the values, right? So this is MView pattern. It is experimental and likely will not be ready by the time .NET MAUI is ready for GA, but it's a thing to consider. If you don't want to write XAML, you don't have to. Part of the benefit of what .NET MAUI is doing is one of the benefits it's bringing to the table, if I go back here to the docs, is this whole architecture here. So the way we used to render UI components was a thing called the renderer. When you write a button, there is a renderer in Xamarin Forms that renders the corresponding native button on iOS or Android. Now they have kind of made that a little more simplified with an interface. Now it's a handler, and the handler is not directly tied to the app kit or the UI kit or the compat widget on Android. It is an interface, right? So other things like F# or MView pattern can still use the same interface and be able to render native UI, right? So that's kind of one of the big benefits. And then everything, like I said, stays in a single project, your fonts, your images. So these are some of the things that were painful with Xamarin Forms, and that's what they're trying to address. And I am way over time, so I'm going to stop, and I can show you Maui demos all day long because I'm excited about this. But hopefully, I was able to share that things are good, things are looking good. This is one of the Microsoft slides again, but look at all the ammunition we have. Things are just only getting better with .NET. So let's go build amazing apps and change the world. Thank you for spending 45 minutes to 50 minutes here with me. I'm here, hanging out here. I got stickers if you want, and I'm here to answer any questions. That's me on the internet if you need to get hold of me. But otherwise, thank you so very much, folks watching virtually. Thanks to you, and folks here, I appreciate you a lot. And thanks for coming out to All Things Open. Hopefully, this is the start of us coming out of our pandemic mode. So thank you all, and hope you have a great evening. Okay.